They will destroy the ABC to protect their mate Rupert Murdoch.
I'm sitting here with Greg again, and I went on this march the other day. Felt good about it because it made me realise that there are thousands and thousands of other people that are also anti-government. So what's the deal?
There are clearly a lot of people who are very, very frustrated about what's going on in the world, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They feel powerless about what's going on in the world, and they want to do something about it. And the traditional way of doing something about something is to protest about it. Protest in the past has worked, even though it was slow. It involved a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice, but it got somewhere in the end. I think that not necessarily young people, but I'll use the term young people because I think most of the people who are frustrated and who are protesting these days are the younger generation. There were probably obviously older generation protesting as well, but I think this business of going out and running around in the streets and protesting with banners and objecting to the status quo in the system is, to be 100% honest, a total and utter waste of time. And the reason why I say it's a waste of time is I think that if you look at recent history and you see what's happened in the world, and you see, I will use two recent examples. There's the whole business with the Gulf Wars, and there's the whole business with the GFC and all the protests that spawned.
Yeah, the Occupy.
Well, you know, the Gulf Wars, there were millions and millions and millions of people in the streets all over the world and protesting about the fact that everybody knew the whole WMD thing was all drummed up. And practically, for all intents and purposes, it made absolutely no difference. Then the GFC comes along. Now, when the GFC works its way through the system, we now have this outpouring, once again, youngsters, tent cities, Occupy Wall Street, the whole movement, the whole thing, a few heads broken in, a few people sprayed with pepper gas and so on and so on. But what difference does it make? None.
No one went to jail.
No one even got prosecuted. No one even said we're going to change the way things are done. No one even said, hey, what we're doing is wrong. What happened was all the guys who caused the problem got rewarded, and all the guys who were not the cause of the problem got austerity imposed upon them in all those countries around Europe. So, you want to go out there and protest with your banners and all the rest of it, I say go for it. You might feel better. It might be some sort of cathartic thing, but it's not going to make any difference. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're venting your anger in a kind of a fairly anonymous kind of a way, in the sense that you're not really directing your anger, you're just venting your anger. And then what happens is, when you've finished venting your anger, you go back to your everyday life. Now, what's your everyday life? Your everyday life is basically going back to supporting the exact monstrosity that you were protesting against. So you're protesting against the monstrosity on your weekend, but during the week you're actually working to support the monstrosity. Then a little time later you go and have another protest, then you go back to supporting it. You can't win a battle like that. Okay? I think that young people these days, because unfortunately most people are financially illiterate, they do not understand what happened with the GFC. They don't know why the GFC happened. They don't know actually what happened. And it's just too complicated for them. And it's too difficult to think about. Therefore, they are at a disadvantage because they don't realize the power that they have to change the system. If only they understood what happened, they would be able to crush that system. If you understand that money and credit are debt, once you understand that, then you realize the power that you have, because all of the asset prices in the world today are denominated in, my house is worth this, or my car is worth this, or that land's worth that. Now, what does worth mean? We now live in a world where everything's financialized and everything is denominated in debt. Money is loaned into creation. So, in other words, if a house is worth $1 million, it's only worth $1 million because somebody is prepared to go into $1 million debt in order to buy that house. I know that's a little bit simplistic. Some people have got deposits. Some people buy with cash. But in general, things are being bought with credit. Now, what credit-based really means is you are not paying for anything when you buy it. You're going to pay for it in the future. You're going to take something out of future earnings to actually pay for that thing. Okay? Now, the thing is that the banks and the governments and all the financial institutions, because all of their assets have a value ascribed to them, but that value is actually someone else's debt. All these assets are all purchased with debt, with credit. The youngsters of this world, instead of running around with their banners and so on, could completely change the world overnight by just changing the way they live and changing the way they spend and changing their value system. They could change everything. If they just said, no, we are not going to participate in this anymore. We are not going to go into a huge amount of debt. We are not going to borrow these huge amounts of money. They would wield so much power, they would change everything.
But hasn't the establishment hijacked the system anyway? If you are not that well off, your parents are not that well off, you go to university, there's no way you can go and pay for university. They have hijacked the prices of university.
You don't even have to go to university. In this day and age, why do you have to go to an established college in order to get an education? I would argue that there are plenty of ways that you could educate yourself, or young people may actually start new educational institutions. The knowledge is out there. You don't have to go and sit in front of a bunch of professors in order to learn certain things. You can teach yourself. The problem is, in order to get accredited, in order to get the tick of the establishment and therefore go and get that job and therefore go and earn that salary, you've got to go through the established process. And that process has been hijacked by all the leeches and all the rent seekers. If people stop going down that path, an alternative path will materialize. It has to. The educational institutions that have hijacked the system can't survive without all this new blood coming in. The new blood stops coming in, they are going to have to change their ways, otherwise they're going to go out of business. They're going to have to. But the point is, at some point, young people have to say, we are not going to do it that way anymore. And then everything's going to change.
Explain, how will it change if young people say, we are not buying into the system?
We need to live sustainable lifestyles. Sustainable in the sense of we mustn't use too much stuff. We've got to be greenies. We've got to think about the future. We've got to conserve and so on and so on. You take that same mentality and you apply that to your finances. The exact same mentality. Sustainable finances, right? In other words, you don't get the latest phone every single time a new phone comes out. You don't get a new gadget every single time one of your gadgets gets damaged. You don't get a new car every time you feel like a new car. You don't go and buy the $2 million house because you can't afford the two. So just don't buy it. Just do something else. Oh, and by the way, vote for someone else. Do not vote for one of the incumbents. And do not vote for one of the major parties. Vote for someone else. I don't care who. Somebody else. Okay? Now, if you start becoming more frugal, and I'm not saying anything radical. It wasn't very long ago that people were like that. It wasn't very long ago that you could afford to buy a house. It wasn't very long ago you could afford to buy a car. It wasn't very long ago that you didn't have to have both parents working like slaves to put their kids through school. Not very long ago, that was when people were more frugal. That was because they couldn't come and charge you $50,000 for a new car because everyone would say, sorry, I can't afford it. Why couldn't you afford it? Because credit was hard to get. Because you needed to stump up collateral. Because you actually had to work and save before you could get something. Work and save before you can get it. You take away the work and save before you can get it, all of a sudden you can have something for nothing. All of a sudden you can have the thing now, hand over the plastic, pay for it in future. But the problem is that you're feeding right into the hands of the parasites, because the parasites are the ones who are giving you the loan. Now they own you. Now you're going to pay for the rest of your life. Now you can't really afford it anymore. Okay, now your husband and wife must join in the game. You must both work. Okay, now you both can't afford it anymore. Oh, now your kids have got to start working. Oh, now your kids can't afford it anymore? Oh, now all of the whole family, all the relatives have got to get... We're going to end up in a situation where there is so much debt and everyone is so snowed under chasing this I don't know what, that the system will in the end collapse. It has to. It can't go on like that forever. But young people just becoming more frugal, just going back to the way it was not very long ago and saying, we are simply not going to take on any more debt that we can afford, will change everything.
How would it change the banking system as it is?
It would change the banking system because bankers make loans. That's what they do. They lend money to people. The more money they lend to people, the more money they make. That's the business they're in. They lend money to people. They lend money to all sorts of people, all sorts of enterprises, dubious enterprises. The GFC happened because they were lending money to anyone with a heartbeat. A capitalist system is not supposed to allow that. A capitalist system is supposed to restrict the expansion of credit so that it doesn't just get lent to anyone with a heartbeat.
Yeah.
If youngsters go back to a situation where they are making sure that they live within their means, it means that whole credit industry is going to undergo a rationalization like you've never seen. And that is what Wall Street and the bankers and all the corruption and everything, that's where it is. That's, if you hit that industry, you've hit the jugular.
Hasn't the establishment already got this huge advantage because they have printed themselves fake cash?
Yeah, but they've printed themselves fake cash and they are working on the assumption that someone is going to make good that cash, because cash is only a claim on resources. It's a future claim on something. If you give me credit, the understanding is that at some future time I'm going to pay you back. So if the young people, if the young people go into a system where they are no longer taking on all that credit, that means that all these bankers and all the current generation who have got all these assets that are supposedly worth so much money, they only worth so much because there's an assumption that the next generation down the line is going to be willing to roll over that debt and take it on from them. You've got $1 million debt on your house. You're okay because when you get to the ripe old age, you want to sell your house and clear that debt. There's going to be someone else who's going to take it off you, and they are going to assume
that price.
They're going to assume it, and they're going to now sacrifice their life and their kids to pay that debt. But if the establishment start getting wind of the fact that the next generation are not going to play that game, everything's going to change because it's going to devalue the present value of the debt. The current debts that are sitting there, everyone's going to realize there's no way anyone's going to be good for them. Because how are you going to repay the debt if you can't palm it off to your kids? Now we have a situation where workers are getting paid less, but they are buying more. They are spending more. We all have to spend. We have to keep the economy going. It's good to spend. It's bad to save. It's good to spend. It's bad to save. Why is it good to spend and bad to save? Because I'll tell you why. Because if you save, the leech that's lending money to you is going to be in pain. If you keep on spending and they're lowering interest rates, you can take more and more debt on, you keep on spending, they're in clover. When you spend, you're paying them. They're in clover. Then slowly the rules start getting changed, so you can't be bankrupt anymore. So you have to pay your debts back. So next thing, your kids have to pay your debts back. I mean, we've been there before. This is, 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, these debt moratoriums and everything from, in the Babylonian times and all, this is what it's all about. You can't keep on paying people less and less and less and have them keep on spending and spending and spending to keep the economy going. That's a con job, if ever there was one. You want to pay me less? Okay, I'm going to spend less. In other words, you pay me less, it's going to hurt you. Can you imagine the effect on the corporatocracy if they cut their workers' wages and as a result no one was buying their product? They'd go, hang on. I mean, Henry Ford found that out. He had to pay his workers more so they could buy his bloody cars. Think about how simple that message is. If you're a youngster and you're out there and you're earning $15 an hour and you're going and paying on Friday night $30 a drink and getting 7 or 8 drinks, and now you're also going to send your kids to school, now you're also going to have a car, now you've also got to feed yourself, and you've got to buy a house, and you've got to do the patriotic thing and not stop spending because that'll cause a downturn in the economy. Come on. You've got to be half brain dead not to see what's going on here. Stop. Go back to a simpler way of doing things. Live within your means and everything will change. Put away your banners. Just everything will change. That's the way it's got to be done. You've got to hit them right between the eyes, the corporates. Right between the eyes. Money.